Yeah, we just asked her. She's.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience. Just so everybody knows why we had to take the break. We did have a medical emergency here in the room. The person is fine and receiving care right now. So thank you again very much for your patience. And we're going to resume. We were still conducting our Governance and Leadership Committee meeting. So I'll ask the chairman of that committee, Sam Smith, to continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. As we just finished up, we agreed to nominate or appoint 4 new student members to the councils of trustees. And so that business is now concluded. The second item of business that we need to take up is an action that will allow us to renew the presidential appointments in a more timely manner this year. As you know, it's kind of a rolling contract kind of thing that we do with this. And without some adjustment in our process, we might be left with either having a slew of extra special board meetings or putting them all off for several months and having great lag between the time of when we do the review and when the Board of Governors then evaluates that, assesses it, and decides whether or not we are going to reappoint a president. So I'm going to turn it over to Randy to give a little more specific explanation of what we're proposing to do.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That actually captured it pretty well. Our presidents serve on 5-year appointments, and a number of those will be coming up for renewal in the next 6 months or so. And so as part of that process, they go through an extensive evaluation that gathers input from students, faculty, staff, alumni, the board. And those evaluation reports are, as they're finalized, they are shared with the board's Governance and Leadership Committee, and then ultimately they would come to the board for renewal of presidential appointments. As Sam, as you said, that takes time, and rather than having all of these clump up and wait until the spring, so that this board is more proactive and nimble, we thought it would be good to give the authority to go ahead and extend the contracts now, but on contingent that the evaluations are positive as reviewed by the Governance and Leadership Committee and by the Executive Committee. This is important because higher ed is a competitive place right now. And the more stability that you can offer a university at every level, the better off it is and the better off the system is. Just so you know, this authority would only allow for the extension of presidential appointments. Any other action would have to come back to the full board for consideration.
Thank you, Randy. With that, I would recommend that a motion be made that the Board of Governors authorizes the extension of presidential appointments contingent upon a satisfactory evaluation as affirmed by the members of the Governance and Leadership Committee and Executive Committee of the Board. Further, the board authorizes the chair and chancellor to finalize terms and execute all necessary documents related to any appointment extension. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you, Abby. A second. So to finalize terms and execute all necessary documents related to any appointment extension. May I have a motion to that effect?
We're getting some.
So moved.
Thank you, Abby.
Second.
I'm not repeating myself. Honestly, I'm not.
All right.
Are we good? Do we have a second?
You just need a second, Mr. Chair.
Is there any
Second.
discussion on this? Hearing none, may I have a vote, call a vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Thank you. The motion is adopted. Madam Chair, that concludes the business of the Governance and Leadership Committee.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to go a little bit out of order, if that's okay. Or do we want to continue with it? Okay. Okay, that's fine. All right, Randy has corrected me, as he does frequently. So continuing with our agenda, our next item is an update on our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and the climate survey. And I'm going to call on Dr. Denise Pearson, who is our Vice Chancellor for DEI, to speak to us. This is on the system-wide climate survey that was completed this year. I don't believe that Dr. Akers is going to be joining for that presentation. So Denise, we look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to share a few comments with you, a few updates about what's happening in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to start with circling back to parts of our July meeting where we focused on establishing a shared understanding of the meanings of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and more importantly, the role of the board in moving our agenda forward from a mission-driven goals perspective. So the slide you see in front of you really reflects our discussion, specifically with regard to how we understand diversity. There was some conversation around making sure we were clear, or we expanded the spectrum of diversity. And in particular, with this slide, we added geography. The other classifications were there, but there was a specific request that we added geography to the list. And so I just want you to see that it is noted there. Another change that we made based on the conversation was being clear on equity versus equality, and where the board, where we agree our focus should be. So I added some language in that second sentence that specifically says, for your consideration, our focus is on equity and not equality as part of the system-wide efforts to close persistent gaps as measured through our board-approved metrics. And then there wasn't much discussion or need for change around inclusion. We all accept or agree that that is how we are seeing inclusion. And what I think we may have added was clear alignment with the board statement of affirmation, which I continue to think is our North Star. The last thing that is reflected in this slide, there was some conversation about who determines what university goals we will focus on and at what pace they will be achieved. So I added a sentence here for your consideration based on what I heard, that universities in alignment with system goals and expressed using the board approved metrics. So this was my recollection of what I think transpired during that conversation for your consideration. Did I capture it correctly? Okay, awesome. So the next thing that I'm super excited to talk about is the DEI Summit. This is the second year that we've taken it on to this scale. It will be happening on November 2nd through the 4th. It's right around the corner. It's virtual again. And just a few highlights for you. There are probably close to 600 registrants at this point. Presentations will be made from PASHE faculty, staff, and students. We will be gifted with opening remarks from Chairwoman Shapiro. And there will be university-based opening receptions across the campus. It's not here, but you can go to the website to register. And I hope that as many of you that are available to register that you do so. And so that is what's happening with the DEI Summit. Really just super excited about the work there. The next thing that I'll talk about, is there any questions about the DEI Summit? Okay. So Randy, ready for the climate survey? Just a couple of things I want to share with you. I just want to remind everybody that the purpose of the climate survey was to inform university work to strengthen our inclusive campus environments and establish some baseline measures for them to chart their progress. The methodology, I think we heard this earlier, we administered 4 different surveys, one for students, one for faculty, one for staff, and one for non-represented employees. They were, slightly different because there are, different concerns and and such. So that was the decision to do that. And there were several questions, and the prompts used a Likert scale, as you can see: strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. We handled the neutral and the non-applicable categories appropriately. Time in the field, we administered it January 31st through March 4th of this year. And the next steps, the system dashboard will be live today. The university is already reviewing their data and having conversations with key stakeholder groups. And we expect that there will be reports on actions to be taken, and it will take some periodic pulse surveys in the future. I'm ready for the next slide, Randy. So this instrument itself, we looked at 6 topical areas: political and religious views, campus diversity, discrimination, bias, and harassment, campus safety, student outreach, and campus experience and engagement. And respondents were given an opportunity, if they wanted to identify themselves by their political and religious views, race, ethnicity, gender identity, military service, country of origin, or physical or other ability. So you can go to the next slide, Randy. In terms of the results, system-wide, we had a total of 13 respondents. Amongst those, 8,200 roughly were students. And I'm sorry, what did I say? 13. I said 13? Okay, well, that wasn't good. We had 13,000. Thanks, Randy. See, it's not just you, Cindy. I get corrected all the time too. So 13,000 students. Amongst those, 8,200 were students, 2,000 faculty, 1,700 staff, and 971 non-represented. So amongst those, we had a total of 4,260 folks. Did I get that one right, Randy? Okay, leave comments. 2,100 of them were students. About 1,000 were faculty, 727 staff, and then 409 non-represented. So those were our responses. We can take the next slide. Well, yeah, we can take the next slide. That's fine. Is Kate not going to come back for this part? You want me to just, Dan? Okay, then I'll just pivot to you, Dan. Do you want to take this? Okay, awesome. Okay, so what you see here. So, okay, this slide right here just shows you the percent agreement by topic and survey group. And this is a little small for me, and I can't quite see that as well. But if you look at campus safety, you can see that, I'm going to see if I can make this larger because I can't, maybe I can see this a little bit better. If you look at the campus safety, you can see the percent agreement by either agree and strongly agree. And we, again, excluded non-applicable and the blanks. So this is the percentage of agreement by topic and survey group. So, I think the reason why Kate highlighted these is because campus safety, employment agreement, and actually, I'm not really sure.
So Denise, let me jump in.
Go ahead.
So these are basically indices. So in any of the topic areas that the survey covered, there were any number of different prompts. So and I don't have the survey questions in my head, but under campus safety, you can imagine questions like the campus is a safe place to be, the police ready available, or security staff are readily available if you need them, that sort of thing. And so they would take the 8 or 9 or 10 or a dozen prompts from any one of these topic areas, and then they would total up those who were responding, recognizing that they felt positively about the subject. So what you're seeing here is that this is the percent of people who responded by group, faculty, non-represented staff, students, et cetera, positively to questions about campus safety. So specifically where it says faculty, 74% of all faculty, agreed or strongly agreed with prompts that suggested that the campus community was a safe place to be, and it's much higher amongst non-represented, or somewhat higher, 85% amongst non-represented staff, 77% amongst students, et cetera. So campus safety is called out. It's one of our, we'll come back to that in a second, it's one of our areas of strength. Employee engagement, let me back up, and politics, political identity are called that as areas of opportunities for us to do some work. I'm gonna back up a little bit and contextualize the survey generally. So employee and student engagement is absolutely critical to improving our student success. The research evidence shows definitively that students who are engaged in the life of their educational community, whether online or in person, are just going to do better. They graduate at much higher rates. And research also shows, and it stands to reason, that employees who are engaged in and taking pride and in their work and in their place of work are also going to be more effective in engaging with students. And so employee engagement and student engagement are central to our system redesign. We've actually done this is the third of 3 surveys that we've done because it is so important. We did one in 2019 around the system redesign to really get a sense of whether the extent to which our community felt we were ready, willing, and able to implement a redesign. We did one which was a very widespread employee engagement survey, but we did not end up using it because we got the results and we're about to distribute them about the week we locked down. And then the climate survey is really just a third attempt at the same thing. We did field it January to February 2021. I just want to remind folks what was going on. January 2021 was at the absolute, it was just at the peak of the Omicron wave. And we were just coming off of it. And so, and as the national data show, there's been some surveys of the impact of the pandemic on employee morale in a variety of industries. K-12 is by far the most demoralized. And then, sorry.
No. Oh, no.
Oh,
I don't understand what the numbers mean.
Yeah,
So like, if we're gonna look at, say, religion, the far right column, and the last one is total, 42% said, what does 42% of religion mean?
So
that they are, 42% are comfortable with how religion is treated on campus, or 42%, or what's it mean? I don't understand those numbers.
And
Yeah,
Randy, you
I
might
was gonna
want to,
ask the
all right,
same
so
thing.
Randy, you might want to have to, or I can load this survey, but so let me take campus safety. So the kinds of questions that were under campus safety were things like campus police keep all students and employees safe. Campus police should be, and you'll see all this on the dashboard, campus police should be armed at all times, et cetera. I feel safe on campus. I feel safe on campus. My family feels safe on campus, et cetera. So we took all the responses to those questions, all the, and then we took all of the questions in any one of those areas and created an index of that, right? And so,
Right,
so
but
when
it's
you're
just
saying,
not obvious, though, what those questions might have been for politics or religion.
correct, and that's
That's-
why you have to go into the dashboard, or we can, you'll see, actually, Randy, if you want to go down 2 slides, you can see some of the politics questions, I believe. Go down to the strengths and opportunities. And if you want, I can give you a little tour of the dashboard. Yeah. No, go. All right. Can you go? Yeah, can you go over to politics? Okay, I can openly express my political views in the surrounding, and can you shrink it so we can see the bar charts? So when you add up this is all respondents. I can openly express my political views in the surrounding community. 47% said yes, I can. 22% no, I can't. 30% were neutral. Right, it's a very large neutral for survey walks. So in the the first question in the community, 42% yes, 20% no. Okay. And then if you go to my political views are treated with respect by administrators, my political views. So we asked people within these categories to self-identify, what are your political views? And then we asked them, how comfortable are you? We asked them these kind of questions. expressing your political views with different segments of the community.
And similarly with the religion. if they're
Religion,
comfortable.
it's, yeah, every section is kind of wash, rinse, repeat. So you identify yourself as a veteran, and then we ask you, how comfortable do you feel as a veteran, given A, B, C, and D? You identify yourself as your religious affiliation, how comfortable you feel giving A, B, C, and D. And so when you get to the dashboard, and Kate was going to give us a little show and tell, when you get to the dashboard, you can actually disaggregate these data quite far, right? So what we've done here is that all respondents, this is the percent more positively responding to these questions. You can look at these data by survey group. You can look for faculty. You can compare faculty to students, faculty to staff. You can look at these data by I think the respondents were asked to identify whether they were far right, center, left, far left. So you can break it down by subgroup. Same with gender identity, same set of questions. We ask people to identify their gender identity, and then we ask the same kinds of questions here. So you can do that, which makes presentation of the data super interesting because you can go really, really deep. It's fascinating stuff. If you hop back up, Randy, to the peaks and valleys slide. So the way into the survey is to start with a summary. Right? And you can see instantly that our greatest strength is that, in general, our communities feel that our campuses are safe. Good. And you can go down and you can break out all the different questions, and you can see how they feel differently, maybe about police and about, nighttime security, whatever the questions are. That the biggest areas of concern are employee engagement. Now that's, again, that aligns with the national data. K-12 is easily the most disrupted in terms of employee engagement, followed by higher ed, and then other industries much further behind. And the politics, politics, we have a good kind of comparator in the University of North Carolina system, which did a very similar kind of survey, focusing specifically, and so we've been chatting with them and others who've been engaged in the work. I mean, my personal view, but others will, this is the point of the survey, is to dive into the data and figure out what they mean. I think what we're seeing here is just the reticence in our political climate about people speaking up about their political views at work, or if I could say it that way. So that's what you're seeing there. And so what's happening now, of course, is that the surveys are out in the universities, which is where the people are. And reviewing these data in a number of different ways and trying to figure out, what do they mean and how do we interpret what's going on? And what can we do? Where do we want to focus our efforts to see where we should strengthen? Remembering that all of these things factor into how well students and our employees are feeling engaged in the work of our worlds, and that becoming more engaged is critical to our achieving our mission. So we take that stuff pretty seriously. So you can imagine that, universities will decide to work in different areas, right? To use these data differently and as suits their particular strategic plans and their thinking. But you can imagine, focusing in a handful of areas, trying to move the needle, trying to get some improvement, and then going back with a pulse survey, I don't know, in a couple of years and say, hey, did we get any better? My biggest concern, I'll get it out there, is that, having been involved in this kind of work for a while in a bunch of different organizations, is that there's so much information here and there's so much good work to do that it, sheds a light on. And yet it's going to be really important for universities to determine how and where they want to focus, because you don't want to attack too broad of a waterfront, right? You really want to focus in a handful of areas. In ways that make sense given the university community. So let me just tick through the other slides so you can see them. So this is one way of representing the index. This is just another way. So if you went from, if you gave each of the points on the Likert scale a number value, agree is a 5, strongly agree is a 5, strongly disagree is a 1, and you did the averages, that's what you're getting here. And you see more or less the same result. You just, because you're looking at a 1 to 5 scale, as opposed to a 1 to 100 scale, it's less dramatic, if that makes sense. But again, you see that campus safety is an area of strength, and you see that employee engagement is an area of opportunity, and you see that the politics and is an area that the political expression is an area where you feel that where you see that pretty much all employee groups are have a degree of discomfort, if I can call it that, in
Mr. Chancellor.
in expressing their views in aspects of the community.
Mr. Chancellor,
Yes, please.
May I ask a question regarding the example you used about political views? Do we ask them why they don't feel comfortable in expressing their political views? As an example, and with the other questions, do we ask why? So we can get a handle or an understanding as to what some people don't feel comfortable about, no matter what the question is.
So we did invite respondents to provide comments in areas which would allow them an opportunity to tell us more. As Dr. Pearson was telling us, so we got a reasonable response rate in terms of the number of comments received. But the discovering about why, and this is the nature of this kind of work, the engagement survey, the results are there then to drive the conversation, which is happening at the universities about why. And so, my hope and expectation is that instead of rushing to solutions, let's do this, people spend a good amount of time pawing through the information. What does this mean? What does this mean for us? Why are we seeing these trends, right? That's the real art here, is to your point, Mr. Bogle, is to try to tease out these interpretations from people's evaluation of the data.
So, for example, if you really, taking Mr. Vogel's example on politics, why don't you feel comfortable? If you go into the data, and this is just as an example because I have not done it, but just as a hypothetical, if you delve into the data and you see that the numbers are being driven, say, by where your ideology is. So, for example, perhaps people with very conservative political views don't feel as comfortable on the campus, or perhaps it's people, with more progressive liberal views don't feel comfortable. That's when you can really dive in and pinpoint,
Correct.
Where you need to address levels of comfort and engagement on the campus.
Yeah, you have to dive into the question level.
Just and a follow-up on that though, like, I don't understand, like, go back to that one slide. So like only half the students think the professors respect their political views? If you go to the detailed thing.
So
Roughly.
keep going.
Oh, you went.
Andy, what are you doing? Hold on. Where are you? Just, can you highlight?
Like, my
the one?
political views are treated with respect by faculty. It says 50.3%.
Yeah, I mean,
So only half the faculty, if I was if you surveyed the students, which I guess you did, only half of them thought the faculty, when you respect somebody's political views, that doesn't mean you agree with them. Like you might think the speed limit should be 100. I think it should be 50. I respect your opinion. I don't agree with it, but
No, so this is interesting, right? This is all, first of all, this is all groups. So it includes students, faculty, staff, non-representative.
Okay.
And they're all asked the same question. I openly express my views in the community, in campus, and then on campus by these various groups. So if you look at the data, faculty have the highest degree of respect for the views of other people, of all of the, right? It's 50% compared to, if you look at all the other green bars, nothing goes out as far, right?
but it's only half though, roughly, all those categories.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's why I say it's an area of interest, right? And what does this mean? I mean, here's an interesting question, and this is why the survey results are out there and will be debated, I'm sure, and I hope for a long time by a lot of people. Does that mean that, what does that mean? Does that mean that people are uncomfortable about expressing their views and they're reading into a faculty's response that that's disrespect because we're not talking about politics? I mean, those are the kinds of questions we have to be asking. If I were so if we were sitting by the dashboard right now and we're having this conversation, I would want to have these question by question comparing students' responses, faculty responses, staff responses, right? So you can see, if Kate was here, she'd say this much more eloquently than me. What we're really looking for is the outliers, because that's where the real information is. So what I'm seeing here is there's a common degree of agreement, 45, there's a high degree of discomfort, or put it that way, expressing, let me be careful. There's actually not a high degree of discomfort. Those bars in red are not that big, right? The bars in yellow are very large for this kind of thing, which suggests to me that's a lot of neutral, which suggests to me no opinion, right? And then, and so what's left is in green, that's the positive side. So what you're seeing is that there's a lot of alignment on the positive side. If I'm digging into these data, I'm trying to see, are there outliers in particular groups? Are students way different than faculty? Are, people with who identify with one political?
So what you
point of
really
view?
want to do is delve into the red bars.
Or the green. Yeah, exactly.
And Chancellor Greenstein, can I add, that's why presidents have already assembled groups to start talking with their different stakeholder groups to answer just that question that you asked. So that work is already underway. We're not just sitting with the numbers. We're having those discussions with faculty, with staff, with students, to get at the why.
Well, I'm glad. Like that very last one there, people should be able to openly express their political views on campus. Only 16, I mean, I would have thought that'd be 100%, like 100% of people would say, well, we might have different views, but
Yeah.
I think you should be able to express yours. I should be able to express mine. I'm just surprised it's not 100%.
Well, but the 24%, people just did not answer the question or didn't care to, or had no, you know what I mean? So it depends on how you read that.
I just point out too, many of the respondents identify that they have the freedom to do it, but they choose not to. And so I think that's represented in some of the ways that they've answered this particular question. They identify their ability to, but choose not to.
I would also, it's really important to point out that we did this because this is really important. I mean, and there are very few universities across the country that are doing this, recognizing that some of these results are going to be uncomfortable. They're going to force uncomfortable conversations, but we need to have them. This is the state of our universities and our system. It's in some ways, in my view, a sobering reflection on the state of American society. And I think we have an obligation as a public university to, concerned as we are with student success and affordable quality education, this is a key component of it. And so we've been looking at engagement for 3 years and went out with a survey at the worst possible time. I mean, deliberately, because you want to know what the floor looks like, and then how can we assemble going forward?
So I'm gonna call on you 1 second, Tanya, but just to quickly also suggest, we might also look at the survey construction again as well and see if it could be constructed to force a response and not allow somebody, to make some kind of response that would fall into that yellow neutral category. So there are
That's
lots of things
correct.
going on. Tanya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to offer two thoughts here as well. One is that depending on the age of the student, when I was much younger, I was pretty much apolitical in college, and that I think that should be part of digging into whether or not people are just not leaning towards any one particular party in the neutral responses. The second thing is that for me, the neutral category also reflects, as well as the age, where the student is in their post-secondary experience with regards to civic engagement. And so there's a lot of research out there that shows that acquisition of a post-secondary credential increases civic engagement. And part of the reason for that are the increased earnings that people acquire by having completed their post-secondary program to study. And so that is one of the goals of having a post-secondary credential. And so, maybe the students who responded were freshmen or early on in their post-secondary program or apolitical. And so that's what I think about when I see that as well.
But there's also, some cultural factors. Some people are raised that you don't talk about politics or religion in public, and they bring those attitudes with them when they come to our universities. That's just a fact.
And Allison has her hand up, and then Sam.
Thanks. I wanted to switch sections to talk about employee engagement. And as the chancellor said, we know that students finding belonging and community on campus is really important. And especially as we try to work on recruitment and retention. But I'm playing around with the dashboard online, and it seems like the students were asked this as well, or were these questions just asked to faculty and staff?
So the surveys are slightly different because the way you would ask an employee about engagement, are things like, I love my job. I haven't thought about quitting. I feel a sense of belonging. The kinds of questions you ask a student about engagement are somewhat different. I have a sense of belonging. I feel comfortable in the university community or something. So it's slightly different. But we've added, but again, these are based on, we add up the questions that are engagement questions are categorized as engagement questions, and we develop those indices. Allison.
Okay, thank you. It's titled employee engagement, so I just wanted to get the sense of that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think this was a slide, we didn't swap it out. There is another. Yes, correct. It is employee and student engagement, and this is all. It is, yeah. So this one is just employees. Yeah.
So I want to really follow up on that. Because with any survey, any polling information, the headlines can be very deceptive and misleading sometimes. And until you really dig into the subsets, the tabs, or what the political pollsters call it, where you can sort of break out, the minutia of the information may be available. So with this, can the system, staff, or can individual presidents, offices, and their, maybe their student affairs world or whomever, can they really boil that all down to say, okay, how many of these students said, I feel a sense of belonging on campus, versus how many faculty say, I'm happy with my job, kind of thing? I mean, is it able to break it down into those segments so that we know what the students' response was this versus what the faculty response? Because like some of these question areas, the politics one that Representative Roy was talking about, if 100% of those 2,000 faculty that responded said, yeah, we welcome political speech, and that represents the 50% of the whole point, well, then that would be very, very bad in my mind.
So
or vice versa. And I'm not picking on anyone. I think from employee engagement in particular, as what I think was the previous speakers were kind of getting at, it's an excellent opportunity and tool if someone either at the university level or at the system level is capable of, weeding through that, because that's getting into the weeds, but we need to.
Yeah, no, let me just show you what's in the dashboard. I'm not Dr. Akers. I never played Dr. Akers on TV, so I'm a little reticent about doing this. But anyway, this is campus safety. They're all the campus safety questions, have to do with the police, safety, accommodations are available, et cetera. And there you can see that's the total, all of the students, faculty, staff, employees, et cetera. In the dashboard, you can decide, I really only want to see what students are saying on these topics, and it will magically refresh. Or you can combine students and faculty, et cetera. You can determine whether or not to show the questions, which this does. You can determine what topic you're interested in. So, whoops.
So right there, when you have up, that would say that I feel safe off of campus. Those are what 2% of the students said, I feel safe off campus.
Yeah. And then let's look at engagement, because we were just talking about engagement. Sorry. So let's look at engagement. Let's look at student engagement, right? So those are all the engagement questions. I feel supported academically. I feel supported emotionally. These are the students' responses. 68% agree with that. 71% agree that they're supported academically. 76% I've not experienced a hostile work environment. So those are pretty good scores, right? So now you might want to say, okay, let's look at, get rid of students and pull in faculty. So this is now, they're going to see a different set of questions. Again, like I said, because the engagement questions, I'm satisfied with my benefits package, pretty high score. This is reverse coded. I do not want to quit my job. right? 61%, so that's pretty good. I love my job, 65%, but then you've got real issues around workload. My work, school, life balance is appropriate, low. My workload is too heavy, low. There are too many expectations. So, those are workload issues, right? Are they COVID specific? Remember where we are, January, February 2021, just coming off Omicron, dealing in multiple realities. You've got some belonging, issues, this sort of sense of, and this is, you read about this in the national press, a lot of industries, sense of disengagement, sense of belonging is beginning to wither. So, that's, and then if you went to the, I don't know, I'm going to look at non-represented staff. Do the same thing for non-represented staff. You'll see a similar set of questions. You'll see that the scores are somewhat higher, but there's similar workload issues. The pattern's very similar, right at the bottom. The life balance, the 3 at the bottom, workload is too heavy, too many expectations. So you're seeing common pattern amongst our non-represented and staff and faculty, right? So this is the kind of analysis that's why we built the dashboard. And I really want to shout out to Dr. Akers and her fabulous team. About March of last year, they received this pile of data and then they have made it available. And this is public. So this site will be launched publicly. It is now. So it's not just us who can look at these data. It is the world. And I want to go back to that original point. This is in my opinion, as your chancellor, I think these are the exact kinds of questions that higher education needs to be asking itself in the interest of its continued improvement. We have to understand where we are. We have to give ourselves the tools of having these conversations, and then critically to focus the work, right? That is so that we can improve the outcomes for our students. So anyway, this dashboard is available to you. You can go to it. You can look at any of the topics, all the topics that Dr. Pearson introduced. Overall climate. You can look at particular groups, persons of color, different political ideologies, et cetera, or political identities. So I would encourage you to do that. And Madam Chair, if you're interested, we can always do a kind of a more detailed PowerPoint, but we wanted to give you a flavor as possible.
And Dan, can I just add, for you, Governor Smith, there is a tutorial of sorts on the landing page, so the data is just not thrown out there to you. So it really, Dr. Akers did a great job setting it up, for folks that want to explore it.
Yeah, definitely. Terrific data, Paul. Really important information. Amanda, I think you have your hand up.
Thank you, Cindy. I want to thank Allison for bringing it up, that it's actually really important that we focus on the employee engagement section. I think it's great that our campus safety is rated so highly. And I am truly disappointed that there are people in this meeting who think that focusing on the politics questions is more important than focusing on our employee engagement, which is clearly a serious problem. And I'm not just talking about faculty. Those of us who work at our universities and we're in the trenches every day, we're working with our students, we're working with staff and faculty. This is a serious problem. And as the faculty liaison and the chair of faculty council, I promise you, we are very committed to doing what we can to help, anything we can do to help. But I also want to encourage you, and great respect for Dan, but I disagree with you. This is not just about COVID. These numbers would have been evident before COVID, but we never had the opportunity to have a really good climate survey done. So I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that this speaks to a much deeper problem than just a pandemic. And please, let's not make politics more important than the engagement of our employees, because we are who make our students feel comfortable, who feel committed to the campus. They're connected. You can't disconnect us. Okay, I just want to make that point. Thank you.
All right,
Dan,
thank you. We're gonna have,
That's okay. If I could just quickly say, Amanda, I appreciate, that comment. And again, I want to remind folks that, underneath the leadership of our university presidents, these discussions are already taking place across all of the different topical areas. Dr. Akers just selected those, but it was not any reflection that the other categories were not equally important. And I can tell you from my conversation with presidents and chief diversity officers, all of the topic areas are being discussed and we're figuring out strategies to get to, as Commissioner Roy said, the why to a lot of these questions. Governor Roy.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bogle, you have your hand up, and then that will be, I think, the last question or comment because we'll need to move on.
I like to applaud the initiative. I think it's important that we know some of the information that the survey or study has found. I would like to have access as to some more of the questions that were asked. And I'm convinced we also need to include why. Why do you feel this way? What is a deterrent for you to feel different, etc.? But I applaud the exercise and thought it was a good idea.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Mr. Bogle. Okay, we are going to go on to the next item in our agenda. I am going to, in a minute, pivot to Dan for his remarks and presentation on phase 3 of system redesign. And again, just underscore what I said earlier. We are now at the stage where the ability to ensure the vibrant future of this system depends on our ability to innovate. We need to keep ourselves very open to the idea that we cannot continue to do things the way we have always done them, or how things have been done traditionally in public four-year higher education. We need to really deeply explore and be open to new pathways and supports for the students we serve today, and equally importantly, the students that we must serve tomorrow if this system is to thrive and if we are to fulfill our mission. I believe that we have the smarts and the will and the dedication and the calling to do that. And I think that this is being demonstrated and will so even more. And as we, really get into talking about new and innovative ways of doing business to help fulfill our mission, I'm counting on everybody on this board and the presidents and everybody else associated with the system to come forward and work together. So with that, Dan, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks. So I'm going to do a 4-hour presentation, 20 minutes, but we'll have an opportunity to come back. So first, I just wanted to echo thanks that you made starting out to Dr. Tail and her team for hosting us here at Penn West, California, and look forward to the continued evolution of this fantastic new venture in higher education, so important for the western part of the state. So appreciate you and your team and everything you're doing, faculty, staff, and students who I had an opportunity to meet with yesterday. There's an awful lot of energy, and I appreciate that. I also want to just a moment of thanks to Paul and Shane and to Rosa for standing up the one SIS. That's the first of several instantiations which will allow us to achieve the objective that you commented on. That's tremendous work. I saw Paul and Shane yesterday. They were, I think it's fair to say, tired, but I think pretty engaged given our last conversation. So thank you to them. I also don't want to ignore the support of the General Assembly and the governor. The investment that they have made, the trust they have shown, and the work that we do has been tremendously important. And the chairs of the Education and Appropriation Committees in the House and Senate in particular, thank you both. Thank them for their leadership and support. All right, I'm going to spend just a minute reminding us of, what we're talking about, why transformation, I guess, is important. So, Randy, if you can jump to what I see as slide 14, thanks. So again, we've talked about our purpose. This is a statutory obligation, is to provide high quality education at the lowest possible cost to students. And that means, career relevant education, enabling Pennsylvanians from all backgrounds to get the education they need to sustain themselves and their families, to participate, in the 21st century economy and to contribute to their communities. And here's the challenge, and we've talked about this, to the next slide. That mission in 2022 is to basically do our part in addressing this problem. 60% of jobs in Pennsylvania today require someone in them with some higher education, but only 51% of adults in Pennsylvania have it. And as you see in the table to the right, the biggest deficits are in the areas that we're most productive with master's and bachelor's degrees. So we go to the next slide. Well, so how much of an increase? If we were to do our part, so you basically take what's our share of today's credentialing, total credentialing productivity in the whole state, and we just take our part of that growth, it means adding about 6,000 more credentials every year. And I think that's BAs and MAs, and it's probably another 4,000 or 5,000 if you added the non-degree credentials. And that entails an enrollment growth of probably 18,000 and maybe another 10 if you include non-degree credentials. Right? That's our doing our part. That assumes every other college and university in the state of Pennsylvania does its part and sees that growth in their credentialing productivity. Next slide. And we're going to have to do it by asking ourselves, where does that growth come from in a world where the traditional student body, which is high school leavers, is about to decline from 130,000 in 2026 to about 113 projected in 2037. And this is about creating new enrollments and credentials, not moving people around. This is not about building our market share. We're not gaining anything if a student who was about to go to one of our peer or competitor institutions comes here. That's not a net gain because they were going to go there. A net gain is getting people into the system of higher education generally, who would not otherwise have entered it. That's what we're talking about. This is not market share. Market share is good, to expand and be clear about that, Madam Chair, right? But this is about net new. So who's out there for the net new? Well, let's look at today's students. I stole this from your master plan, Tanya. This next slide. It's not yours. Oh, I cribbed what you cribbed. Yeah. So I want everybody, thank you for doing it. You did a lovely job. So, and this is really important because I'm going to say it, and I don't want to have a conversation about the 3-year degree. But in that conversation that we had at the last meeting, it was clear to me that we need to remind ourselves constantly who our students are. Have a look at this slide. I want you, each of you here, and who are the 8 people who are listening, to put yourself back in your higher education classroom. Right now, in your head, choose your favorite class and go into it. And ask yourself, were 2 in every 5 of the people in that class over the age of 25? Don't go to your EDD. Go to your undergraduate. Were 2 in every 5, with 40% going part-time? Were a quarter of the people in the class, the students in the class, were a quarter of them parents with children? And were 50% of them financially independent of their parents or guardians? That is our student body today. That is the student body in Pennsylvania. That is the students who are available to us. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we do to add net new, not the ones who are already coming? All right, so we go to the next slide. These are going to go quickly. So how do we do that? We have to recognize that students, who they are, we've just done that. And then we have to change the way we work so we can serve them better. So that means, what does it mean? It means that in traditional, we're not abandoning the high school graduates, do very well by high school graduates. So call them traditional markets. We have to strengthen the pipelines, the way we connect with our schools. And we've heard about our enrollment successes, and that has a great deal to do with our reconnection with our schools, with reconnecting, stronger pipelines with our community colleges, and also improving the outcomes for students who are enrolling from those traditional populations. That's a big chunk of what we need to accomplish. We will accomplish the growth that we need. A big chunk, probably about a third, is going to come from those traditional markets. But it also means, but there's not enough. It also means moving into underserved or adjacent or new markets. We talk about students who are maybe getting out of college, getting out of high school. They're college ready maybe, but they're not coming to college. So how do we get to those students. They're probably coming from under-resourced communities or first in their family to go to college or working, discovering that they can go into the job market right away and earn $20 or $25 at a, local warehouse. How do we go into those students and make the case? How about adults who maybe have some college but no degree? Or how about adults who have no college? Or how about adults or students of any age who don't really want necessarily a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, but they just want a certificate or a license or something that demonstrates that they have the competencies that they need to get the next or a better job. We have to be able to think about expanding into those areas as well. So change the way we work so we can open the aperture on who's coming into our universities. I think it also comes by affirming our commitment to our mission. Our mission is affordable pathways to career relevant education that enables students to sustain themselves, their people to sustain themselves and their family, et cetera. Our mission is not to serve a small segment of the student body. High school leavers who look more like me than not like me, who come from families of middle income. It comes from a choice that we need to make about whether we're going to evolve and change so we can continue our mission, or we're going to nurture the status quo and leave Pennsylvanians and Pennsylvania behind. Go to the next slide, Randy. That really, oops, got ahead of you. Go to the next slide. That was really the purpose of our system redesign. It means continuing in our transformation. And so in order to support this, to really begin to support this direction, I'm going to propose that we host over the next several meetings a handful of innovation sessions. And the goal, to be perfectly honest, is to get us all and our stakeholders and General Assembly and the general public understanding that the education of today and tomorrow is not and cannot be like the education that they may have had. And to really begin to feel more tactically, more comfortable with what that actually means. So we expect to host a number of, call them innovation sessions. If we need another term, we can come up with something better. Obviously grounded in national dialogue. Certainly we'll focus on system level initiatives, but we're going to ground the work concretely on the stuff that's already happening at our universities. We'll always tie the work specifically to outcomes, and we'll always be thinking about new ways of doing things, new initiatives that might be appropriate at the system level. So some of the innovation sessions, some examples of what we might do, focus on program mix and pathways. Well, that's the different journeys that we make available to students so they can pursue a credential, and how we might be thinking about reimagining them. Dual enrollments, people who enroll directly in high school and college at the same time, 3-year degrees. We talked a little bit about that. Transfer pathways, improving community college, credit for prior learning. We do a lot of that at our universities. How do we award credit to students who've actually, whether they served in the military or they've demonstrated competence in certain areas, they don't have to come back and take a course to learn something they already know. So quicken their path through a credential. And we'll talk a little bit today further about non-degree credentials, moving beyond the master's degree and the bachelor's degree to certifications that enable students to demonstrate their value in the market. We'll talk about student supports. This is how we help students along their journeys holistically, so they don't have to go to different places and figure out where to academic advice, financial advice, career advice, health and wellness support. How do we make those available to students in a seamless way, recognizing now that the student body is much more diverse, because it includes adults with families who are working, as well as students who are traditional in age and maybe not entirely ready for the challenges of a college experience. Talk about delivery modalities, online, hybrid. How about augmented reality and virtual reality, which is already making its way into our universities and proving to be a powerful educational tool. Maybe even talk about course scheduling, making use of all of the hours of the day, because not everybody is available to be educated between 9 to 5, or where our courses tend to cluster, which is 10 to 2 on a weekday. So that's the innovation sessions going forward. Today we're gonna focus on student enrollments, because Enrollments are our priority. So we're going to talk about what we're doing to ignite student enrollments. I'm going to go pretty quickly, even more quickly maybe. Quick recap. We've already accomplished a lot, and I want to call that out. It's been good work. It's been hard work, great work by the board. Our allocation formula, our sustainability policy, they have built a policy environment which is basically predicated on enrolling, on incentivizing, on creating a reward structure for enrollment. Not just any enrollment. If you think about the allocation formula, it encourages us not only to enroll, but to enroll students of non-traditional backgrounds. Last year, we revised our transfer policy, requiring universities to accept students who come to us with an AA or an AS degree to be admitted as juniors. We've increased use of education and general fund dollars for student financial aid, huge, and seen considerable growth in student financial aid, which has helped us in our enrollment. And the board, of course, has frozen tuition to keep costs down. And there's any number of things going on at our universities that we've actually seen bearing fruit already, strengthening school partnerships. There's direct admissions programs, I think at Commonwealth University and Millersville University, which are quite exciting. You go to a school and it's anybody who meets this threshold, you're automatically in. Good. Eliminating underperforming tuition pilots, Indiana University last year, and many other innovative things at the university level. And we've seen some results, Randy, if you go to the next slide, which shows, obviously, there's our first-time freshmen. We're actually, there's a report published this morning showing that the national average in our sector is down 1% in first-time undergraduate enrollments. We're up 7%, so we're tracking well ahead of the national average. To the gentleman who called in this morning, fascinating question, are you seeing a kind of a delayed enrollment? This is not, we're looking at, if we are, it will show up in the average age of our first-year students, so we're looking at that. We don't yet have an answer. The national data suggests that delayed enrollment is not happening in our sector, but again, we're looking at our data specifically. So we're seeing some progress already, which is great. So today I want to look at three areas very quickly. Obviously, strengthening university enrollment. We're engaging with a third party to work at our universities to look at their enrollment management, and which includes new student enrollment and retention practices, and to basically, assess those practices in a way. Look at those practices in a review of what are the most promising practices you're seeing emerging in the industry, and to make some recommendations to our presidents and their leadership team about where they can strengthen the work. So that is underway. We're about to engage a third party in that work. And then we will ask them to work with universities over the next 2 years, just dividing the workload a little bit. So and continuously report back to the board on what we're finding. And obviously, more importantly, or as importantly, making recommendations to the presidents and their teams. The second thing I want to I'll turn to Randy a little bit on this one, and we've spoken a little bit about this. There's a lot of discussion in the board, and since I've been here in general about, we should leverage the PASHE brand. Well, and there's a lot of different opinions about what that means. So we're decided we'll actually try to nail that down a little bit. So we're working with East Stroudsburg University and their enrollment management support group, people who support them in recruitment, student recruitment, to evaluate, if I'm a prospective student of East Stroudsburg University or any of our other universities, does it matter? And if so, how, whether that university is part of a system? I don't know, Randy, if you wanted to hum a few bars.
That's exactly right. We're working with East Stroudsburg and their external consultant that does their marketing and recruitment and marketing management. And the idea there is let's work in sort of a pilot fashion with a real live situation. So East Stroudsburg is already doing great things, with their recruitment. We've heard those numbers, impressive numbers, and they already have a great firm working with them. So let's just insert this as an additional question for them to wrestle with. And so that firm is looking at a number of ways through perhaps through surveys with prospective students and their parents, through focus groups, through post testing or A/B testing of different messages to understand, okay, we understand you choose a university because it's the university. But if you knew it was part of a system and you knew why that was important, would it make an additional impact on your choice? So it's going to be fascinating to see where this comes, and we should have some real responses by the end of the semester.
Do you want to dive into non-degree credentials or pause?
Where are we?
We are
What
a
time?
little behind schedule, so it's a matter of how much you want. I would hate to see you go quickly through the conversation.
Yeah.
So why
it's
don't we
really
go,
we can do it.
why don't we go to approach and we can do longer on non-degree credentials?
Yeah, we could do a workshop on non-degree.
All
a
right, I
public
think that's a
innovation
good,
session.
okay, I think that's a good idea because I don't want to give this short trip. This is the most
Yeah.
exciting stuff. You know, we spent so many years figuring out the expense side. This is the really exciting stuff.
Yeah.
This idea of the 21st century regional university, what it means. This is our moment to really fulfill our mission and, you know, to be a template for the country. And I just think it's enormously important. And really, you know, one of the reasons that I'm so excited to continue, you know, on the board with this work. So, all right.
And, no, and can I just quickly shout out to two people and the excitement around the work. We have tremendous faculty who are working into their courses, and we'll talk about this at some length.
Yeah.
Opportunities for students who are, by completing their course, will actually end up with some form of certification that has value. And I ran into Dean Sylvester Williams at ESU's, hopefully maybe invite him to come talk to us. And Hope Lineman, who I see is on screen and disappointed is not to be able to talk about the work that she's done with Google and partnerships that she's establishing with Google and our credential registry. But we'll come back, Hope, and there's tremendous work going on already. It's very exciting.
Yeah. So I
Thank
look
you.
forward to that, and thank you, board, for committing in advance to a workshop. Okay, let's go to the next item of business on the agenda, which is the University Success Committee meeting. I'm going to turn now to Larry Skinner, who is chair of that committee, to moderate this session. It's an important session. So I encourage board members to engage during the committee session, because once we finish with it, these actions will come before the full board for ratification today. So Larry, I see you on Zoom. Let me turn it over to you.
Good morning and welcome. I will ask Charissa to do a roll call of the University Success Committee.
Certainly. I see
Thank you.
Governor Skinner,
Here,
Governor Weaver, Governor Gindelsberger, Secretary Jones,
Here.
Representative Roy,
Here.
Governor Scott, Governor Yeomans, and Chair Shapiro. Thank you. We have a quorum.
thank you.
I'm here, Charissa. I couldn't find unmute in time.
Quite
All right,
all
thank you.
We're good, thank you. We have two items for consideration by the University Success Committee today. Both of these items, approval of the system's appropriation requests and 5-year capital spending plan, come before the board each year at this time. The first item is approval of the E&G appropriation request. The appropriation request is based on university current year budgets and overall system needs. As part of the comprehensive planning process, or CPP, planning goals are established on a 3-year basis. The submission of this year's CPP is the resetting of those goals with a continued focus on sustainability and student success. Before we turn to the appropriation, I want to thank the universities for everything they've been doing to help our students succeed. Given the historic increase in appropriations, our universities are able to better serve and innovate while at the same time addressing affordability for our students. Our campuses are full of life, with our students back experiencing a full breadth of academic and campus activities that is available to them. Given the historic increase in our appropriations, which was done to align the system more closely with its needs for operations, this year's request will be reflective of what is required to address inflationary increases. While we welcome additional support, we understand that the appropriation is just one way the Commonwealth can support our students. Therefore, we will continue to advocate for direct-to-student funding that aligns with high demand workforce needs throughout the Commonwealth, as well as increased university funding. The materials provided with the board agenda have been developed through this year's CPP to support the ongoing educational and general operations of state system universities. I would like to turn it over to Molly to walk us through the budget and appropriations request discussion. Molly?
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. And Randy, if you could put the slide up with the 22-23 budget. So as part of the appropriation motion, we actually have three parts, and I'm going to walk through the first two, and the chancellor is going to take the third. And those entail approval of the 22-23 university budgets, which is always a component of this action. Discussion and a little more details regarding the inflationary adjustment that we are requesting, and then some discussion around targeted funding for students in high demand areas. So the first part of our motion, I'll jump to the numbers, is the approval of the 22-23 budget. And I do want to cover a few of the highlights and trends. Universities have been working diligently to pursue their financial sustainability plans, working those plans and implementing those, and you see that reflected in this information. And they've also greatly benefited from the historic increase of the state appropriation, which is also reflected in these budgets. The budgetary information that we provided to you in pages 11 through 17 reflects the education in general, or E&G component of our budget. That is the largest and primary component of our budget. It contains all of our academic enterprise, student services, and administrative areas, and it totals approximately $1.6 billion. On the revenue side, the 22-23 budget reflects the board's action to keep tuition flat, and is also paired with the enrollment trends that we've been discussing for this year, with our overall tuition revenue being down approximately 5%. The state appropriation again reflects the strong growth of almost 16% to $552 million, and the associated new distribution to universities that we approved in July. Other revenue is trending closer to more normalized patterns. The prior year still reflecting some of that one-time COVID aid, both the university's aid as well as the federal funds that were distributed. I want to make note that the $125 million of 22-23 federal aid, that is not yet incorporated in these budgets, allowing for a clearer indication and picture of recurring revenues against expenses. However, we will provide updates on those funds as we progress throughout this fiscal year. On the expenditure side, personnel reflects workforce planning steps that universities have taken in responsiveness to financial sustainability, which have greatly helped mitigate rate impacts regarding salaries and benefit rate increases. Also, you see reflected increases in one-time expenditures for financial aid to address affordability for our students. That has been funded largely through the federal funds or through other designations that universities have made with their funds. Overall, that investment in student aid has grown substantially. We're now reaching up to $110 million for the current year, 2023. I'll also note that inflationary cost increases and some one-time expenditures are driving growth in services and supplies. So for the 22-23 budgets overall, there's a $15.8 million projected deficit. That's isolated to just 3 universities, and it is not unexpected. Those 3 universities were those that did not benefit or weren't positively impacted by the increase in appropriation as a result of our change in formula. And so you'll see in the university CPPs and narratives some discussion about next steps and actions that would be taken at those institutions to bring into balance. I also want to note that the 22-23 budgets have all gone through University Councils of Trustees and been approved, and that is reflected in the information. To the next slide. So just a few more comments, just kind of rounding out the budget process that I want to cover. Our budget process is grounded in goal setting, and shown here you see a snippet of the dashboard that we have around our goals. That is, everyone has access to that. It's published for the public, and it really reinforces the goal setting process that's embedded in what we do. We have goals surrounding enrollments, we have retention goals, graduation, persistence rates. So it's very comprehensive, and it's part of our budgeting process. Next slide.
So also in terms of the goals and outcomes, as we look across the planning horizon, from a financial perspective, specifically, universities were provided with goals of meeting targeted student to faculty ratios, as well as balancing their budget by the end of the 3-year planning period 24-25. These goals were substantially met. Where there were shortfalls, those were outlined in university narratives where additional steps may be taken to realize those goals over time. Our process with the budgeting does also involve a peer review among provosts, CFOs, presidents. That review has begun, and that feedback informs primarily the upcoming or 23-24 year. And that review is going to wrap up in November for considerations that the universities can incorporate in our mid-year budget update process. I also want to note that with the help of leading practices internally in the system, we've introduced a new planning tool to assist with academic program analysis as well. So the academic program array tool will provide quite a bit of additional information from a planning perspective. So that rounds out the first component around the 22-23 budgets. And then I do want to shift and talk a little bit about the appropriations request, which is the second of the 3 items. So as part of last year's $552 million request, we did note that that was the amount that we were seeking to operate sustainably rather, and to maintain affordability for our system. And that future increases would reflect primarily inflationary adjustments. So we head to the next slide. So when analyzing inflation, we examine the Congressional Budget Office's projections across various CPI indices. CPIU, the Urban Index, is a very comprehensive index that incorporates prices across the largest array of goods and services that our universities are subject to, and the other indices trended in similar patterns as we saw with CPIU. And so we looked a little further at this, and these charts show you some of those patterns over time, both historically and those projected by the CBO. Looking a little deeper at those CBO projections, when we took a look at how the actual results for the most recent quarter played out, you'll see the jump in terms of, not necessarily those projections of lowering inflation materializing. And so in studying all the data, heading to the next slide, we really felt that given the unpredictability of inflationary projections and all that goes into that, we analyzed the 3-year historical average of the annual changes in inflation. That resulted in 3.8% on an annual basis, or approximately 21 million. So that reflects the request that we're making as part of this motion. That would mean a total of 573 million from a state appropriations perspective, an increase of approximately 21 million. So that covers the first 2 components, and I'll turn it over to the Chancellor to talk about the third, which is a targeted area.
Thanks so much. This. This grows directly out of the what we were talking about before, shows how part of the innovation is to continue to align our focus on the needs of our owners, the state, by looking what we can do in areas where the state is experiencing the most difficult workforce shortages. So if you go to the next slide, and this grows out of work the presidents began in their late spring, early summer, asking that question: what more can we do, and how can we do it? We did some analytical work to show that our biggest program areas, business, health professions, and education, map directly onto the 3 areas of greatest employment need in the state. So we're using our program data and the state's workforce development data to derive these slides. We also have considerable strength in other high need areas, including computer science, engineering, and social work. So if you go to the next slide, so then the question, and if you look, we're also punching above our weight in so many of these areas. So I'm going to start with the column on the right, which says 7%, 6.9% of all employees in those industry areas shown on the left, working in 2021, 7% of them graduated from a Pennsylvania State System university in the last 15 years. Any number above that shows where we're punching above our weight. So you can see 7.5% in finance, Go down to teaching, you see 22.8% of all teachers working in the state in 2021 graduated from here. Randy, if you go over to the next set of columns, the next set of yellow, just for fun and giggles. This is, if you look at the percent of our reach, if you define our reach, not in terms of our graduates, but in terms of the number of people who either apply, enroll, or graduate from here, our reach is even bigger. 36% of all teachers working in 2021 either applied to, enrolled in, or graduated from a state system university. In healthcare, it's about 21%. Right? So we have a lot of reach. And it, again, aligns with those areas that I presented before as areas where the state has the highest needs. So then we went on, and you go to the next slide, and we said, well, what would we need to do? There's the growth that the state needs today, by the way. This is not like ramp up over a bunch of years, although it's going to take some time. To meet, just assume everyone else is doing their part. Other colleges and universities are growing at the same rate, same assumption that we used in the last conversation. What do we need to do to meet that growth? And you can, and how, and recognize, and we're trying to identify that what we need to meet the growth of people working in Pennsylvania. So we know how many of our graduates work in Pennsylvania 10 years after they graduate. So how many enrollments do we need to grow by in order to deliver to the state that many additional teachers who are going to work in Pennsylvania? 1,500 teachers, 1,300 school, 1,400 people in business, another 700 nurses and physician assistants, et cetera. So then we went on to, okay, well, what's stopping us from delivering those students? And there's two things that we discovered. Again, this is all based in our analysis of our own data. There's two things. Well, one of them is that some of the program areas, nursing, engineering, they're expensive to maintain. And if you grow them too big, they become a financial draw on the rest of the university. So there's a limit to what you can do. And in some areas, particularly in the STEM subjects, you know, some additional targeted student supports for students, you know, coming through the STEM pipelines, overcoming hurdles of math and some of the science prerequisites. And that might require some additional, those two things might require some additional support for the universities. But the biggest thing, and we know this from our conversations over the last several years, the biggest thing stopping us from growing in the way we need to grow into those credentialing areas is that even though we're the most affordable higher education option available in the state, it's still too expensive for so many students. So what can we do in terms of additional student financial aid to reach those numbers? Again, we used research which shows, you know, how many more students you can enroll and credential for every additional $1,000 of student financial aid. To build a little model, I don't think it's going to win a Nobel Prize. I'm a little disappointed by that, but threw all this into a model and came up with the following, Randy, if you go to the next slide. Those would be the cost. In order to produce that level of credentialing productivity, left to right, targeted student support, student financial aid. Financial aid for students going into those programs of study that lead to credentials in those industries. About $100 million should give us those numbers, additional student financial aid. The additional university support overcome the challenges of high cost programs and some additional supports in the prerequisites, the STEM prerequisites, about 13 million. So an additional targeted request of $112 million for that level of growth in the area that the state is most urgently requiring to grow its workforce. And the vast majority of that 112, 90+% of it is in student financial aid. And I think, Molly, take questions on the whole.
Yeah, that
package.
concludes the three components. We'd be happy to take questions and turn it over to Chair Skinner.
You're on mute, Larry.
Thank you, Molly and Dan. Based on the information that was just shared with us and provided in the board materials, I move that the committee recommend that the Board of Governors approve, number one, the fiscal year 2022-23 D&G annual operating budgets for the state system universities and Office of the Chancellor, reflected in attachment 1, beginning on page 16. And number two, a fiscal year 2023-24 D&G appropriation request of $573,464,000. And 3, continued advocacy for further support for the universities and direct-to-student funding focused on programs aligned to high-demand workforce needs in the Commonwealth at $112 million. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Before we take a vote on the 3 items before us as a single action, would any committee member like to separate the items and vote on each of them individually? Since there is none, committee members, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, it has been passed. The second and final item on our committee agenda is the approval of a capital spending plan as presented in the board materials. Annually, the board reviews the 5-year capital spending plan, but approves only the current year of the plan. The attached plan reflects continuity with last year's 5-year planning period. The plan assumes an $85 million allocation of Commonwealth capital appropriations from the governor, which again is higher than previous years. We are very thankful for this addition given the needs across the universities. I would like to turn it back to Molly to review this item.
Great, thank you. So as was mentioned, typically our capital plan includes 70 million, but we are really pleased this year to say that we've been provided 85 million towards our capital priorities, which has created some additional capacity for our university's needs. The 22-23 plan does contain a sizable amount of infrastructure and deferred maintenance work, with 35.5 million dedicated to utility infrastructure and related upgrades to water and other utility systems at 2 of our universities. These projects are critical to keeping the campus infrastructure operational without disruption. Funds of 3.8 million are to address demolition of approximately 93,000 square feet at the Bloomsburg location. That's made possible from their planning and realignment around optimizing their space. The remainder of the plan reflects the university's current prioritized needs regarding funding. It addresses building usage needs, as well as key life cycle components across various facilities, addressing mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and building envelope systems, as well as ADA needs. All projects were previously authorized by the General Assembly, and they've also been evaluated in light of university integrations. As a reminder, the 5-year rolling plan is updated annually, but the board approval in this action item is for the first year only. That concludes my update.
Thank you, Molly. Based on the information that was just shared with us as outlined in the board materials, I move that the committee recommend that the Board of Governors approve the fiscal year 2022-23 capital spending plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Madam Chair, that concludes the work of the University Success Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Committee Chairman. We really appreciate it. And let me just personally commend the work of Molly, Sharon, Kate, the entire team. It is such a pleasure to look at both E&G and capital budgets that are so thoughtfully produced, based on good numbers, analytical, targeted in the case of particularly with E&G toward both sustainability, but also the priorities of the system and the universities. So I just really commend you, and I thank you for getting us to this point that we are in general, in terms of being able to submit a budget request that just makes total sense. Okay, so with that, we are now going to take up the committee recommendations in one motion, unless any board members want an item separated out. Okay,
There
hearing
are no
no.
hands.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no such request, can I have a motion that the Board of Governors approves the committee actions as recommended by their respective committees?
A move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
No hands.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any, okay, thank you. Any opposed? Thank you very much. And by the way, I think these votes are testimony to, to what I just talked about. So again, thank you very much. So to close this out, for the record, I want to report that the board met in executive session yesterday from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. to discuss legal, contractual, and personnel matters. Before we adjourn, I would like to ask if there are any other matters to come before the board. Okay, hearing none, I adjourn the meeting.